thank you all for coming this afternoon. I appreciate you coming by after lunch. We'll try to keep this entertaining to keep you all awake this afternoon after the lasagna. But I'm very happy to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me and for having me here. This afternoon, we're going to focus, like Robin said, on curriculum inquiry or curriculum alignment between edTPA and your program, the courses and field work that are part of your education preparation program. Just to give you a little bit of background in terms of my experience with edTPA, gosh, we started edTPA, first came to Wisconsin in about 2012. That was the year that I started as a faculty member in the College of Education in Oshkosh. And my second semester there, our dean and then associate dean asked me if I would take the leadership of being edTPA coordinator, if I would take on that role. So I did, and very quickly, started learning everything I could and figuring things out. But we were a relatively early adopter, Wisconsin was. So we didn't have state conferences in place at the time. We really didn't have many models to follow. We didn't have a lot of people to reach out to. So it was very much building the plane while we were flying it. Sometimes with greater degrees of success than other times, as you probably know. But we've had a tremendous amount of success both in Wisconsin and at Oshkosh. So this is our first this is our second consequential year of edTPA. Last year we had a full year of consequential edTPA performance. Our state has chosen a cut score of 38 to kind of give you a little bit of a context about where we are. And the year before that, so 2015-16, we had all of the students in the state, all of the teacher candidates had to submit edTPA, but it was not consequential for licensure. So kind of from 2012-13 up until last year, we had no consequence or kind of an extended opportunity to pilot. A lot of the lessons that we've learned and that I'll share with you today are from that extended opportunity to pilot and to kind of try to get our hands in to edTPA and figure out how to support candidates, how to prepare them in coursework and field work. So we've learned a lot of lessons. And then the other piece of what I do, I am a member of the National Academy with Scale, with Stanford. So Kelly calls on me every once in a while to say, can you come and help facilitate workshops? So this is my favorite part of what I get to do. Because very much what I will share with you today is a story of success. And that's really what I want you to take away from this, is that it's complex, it's dynamic, it's challenging, but it can be accomplished and it can be done very well. So we, like you, and many others in the country, we're at a different place. So what we're going to work on, or what we're going to talk through this afternoon is how we've kind of gotten from where we were with no preparation, no support in our program to a place where I feel like we have very good support within our program. So I'll introduce you to the process of curriculum inquiry. We'll talk about the development of embedded signature assessments so that you can understand a little bit about what those are about. I'll share one with you. You have a handout already. So I'll share and talk about that with you. And then we'll have some time for dialogue and questions in terms of thinking about your own programs and opportunities to embed experiences in your program that do align with edTPA. So the one kind of preface that I give is, edTPA is one measure of candidate performance. A lot of our states have hinged licensure on that one measure. That's not for me to pass judgment on, right? My state has done it as well. But we need to make sure that what we're doing in our programs are preparing our students to be successful educators, including the things that are mission and vision critical to our programs. It's important that we don't lose sight of that. Today we're going to focus entirely on aligning a curriculum to edTPA. So we're going to look at how our curriculums align with the performance of edTPA. And I know that can be frustrating and it's a very limiting discussion because there's so much that edTPA maybe doesn't capture that are important constructs to our programs. We're not going to be talking about those specifically today, but I encourage you as you go back to your institutions and you take this idea and these processes with you, that you don't forget those. They're really important to make sure that we are aligning the experiences in our program so that candidates can be successful on an external measurement of their teaching effectiveness, but also on those things that are important to us as faculty within a program to make sure that our candidates develop those knowledge, skills, and dispositions as well. So kind of just the thinking to keep in the back of your mind as we're talking today. So where were we? In 2012, here's where we were. And in the same place so many people are finding themselves, right? Unfunded mandate came down from our state. No resources, no funding, right? Nothing. No one understood anything. No preparation was embedded in any programs across the state. So we were where some of you might find yourselves, where some of you probably did find yourselves if you're a little farther along. And so for almost 5 years later, where do we find ourselves? We're in a very different place, very different place. I wish I could put up there that there was 100% or even robust faculty engagement. But there's faculty engagement, which is a big step from where we were. You can take that and read into that whatever you want, right? But we certainly have faculty members who are less engaged, but for the most part, we have very good faculty engagement now. Our instructional academic staff, so our part-time staff, our adjunct faculty are engaged as well. Most of them are very much on board with wanting to support our candidates, wanting to help produce the best teacher candidates in the state. So we've had really fantastic degrees of success in getting people on board. Our university supervisors, they've also been an amazing source of support for our candidates. So we've relied on them as well to provide some of that. But definitely faculty engaged. We now use edTPA data to drive programmatic decisions. It's not the only thing that drives our programmatic decisions, but it certainly impacts our programmatic decisions. So we definitely see more data-driven decision-making coming out of our college now than ever before. And even if we're not talking about edTPA data, it's really given us an opportunity to focus on using data to make any decision and not kind of just my thinking or my thoughts or what I feel about my program, right? But actually using whether it be edTPA data or another source of data. So that's been a really good thing for us. Lots of resources developed. That has really been one of the things that I've worked on. Again, we were an early adopter, so we didn't have people to reach out to and say, can I see, how do you do, what do you do when? We didn't really have many states. We only had the states that had participated in the scale pilot. So it wasn't very many, and we really weren't communicating as a network of professionals at that time. So we've really come very far. We found that we were developing a lot of our resources ourselves. In our state, all of our public institutions, the edTPA coordinators meet once a month for a phone call virtually. We just connect. And then we also connect once a year in the lovely and charming Wisconsin Dells. If you've never been there, it is the water park capital of the world, people. Yes, it's charming if you're 10. If you're 44, it's a little less exciting. So we meet, and one of the things that we have been very committed to as a group of edTPA coordinators is producing deliverables or some tangible outcome. So we have so many resources developed that we share across our state, and then other resources that myself and my colleagues have developed for our own institution. So I can talk a little bit about those as well today, and kind of point you in a direction of where you might be able to find some of them. So some of them are out there kind of for public use as well. A deep or deeper, maybe, understanding of the requirements of edTPA. I kind of only half jokingly say, I mean, it's a beast, right? A 64-page how-to manual to take a test, that's a big deal, right? That's a lot, and it takes a long time. It takes a lot of time sitting with that handbook and walking through that handbook multiple times over and over and over to really begin to kind of marinate in that and understand all of the requirements and all of the kind of intricacies for each different handbook. Hopefully you only have one or two handbooks that you have to tackle. I got to tackle many of them, so learned a lot about the different requirements for edTPA as well. And then the other thing that I feel very confident, very proud of my colleagues for what we've done is embedding preparation for edTPA into our program. I've been asked multiple times, isn't that just teaching to the test, Lori? Isn't that what we tell our students not to do? Aren't you just now promoting teaching to the test? And here's my response to that. In some ways, perhaps we are, but I would argue that that's only a problem if the test is not what we do in real life. If what we do in real life is captured in that assessment, well, then I better be teaching the knowledge, skills, and dispositions that you need to be successful in real life, which are just going to happen to be captured on that assessment. Now, I'm in no way saying that edTPA is the one form of assessment. I think that what is embedded and included in edTPA is all evidence of effective teaching. There's nothing in it that I would say, wow, that should come out because I don't want my teacher candidates to be able to do that. There's nothing in there that is harmful or incorrect or not good practice. There are things outside of edTPA that aren't necessarily captured quite as well by the assessment. So when people ask me, well, if you're embedding opportunities in your classes, in field work, to strictly prepare them for edTPA, aren't you just teaching to the test? And really, it's my response back again is, it's really preparing them to be good educators, which is truly what I believe edTPA is evaluating. It's not everything, it's not comprehensive, but that's where we pull other pieces from our program in. So, I just want to kind of put that out there so that you understand my framework and my perspective as we walk through this. edTPA is not like anything else. It's not like any other assessment that we've had in the profession. And it requires us to really make sure that in order for candidates to be successful, that they are having opportunities along the continuum of their program to learn from some very specific things. So that's what we're going to talk about for the rest of the afternoon together. Does anybody have any questions as of right now? No? Yeah, I'm pretty laid back and pretty informal. So if you have a question, you do need to raise your hand because, I'm sorry, remind me of your name. Cheryl. Cheryl is going to run around with the microphone. So we have to give her some exercise this afternoon. So make sure you ask questions. But Cheryl will bring the microphone to you because we're recording. So please, if you do have questions, just raise your hand so that Cheryl knows to kind of pop over to where you are. But don't feel like you need to wait until the end to ask questions. Please, if I'm not saying something clear, please holler and let's kind of address it right away. One of the key pieces that I do want to make sure we're all on the same page with is the difference between preparation and application. This is a big differentiation or a big difference between these two that I see when we talk about curriculum alignment. It was a couple years ago now, I was on a conference call with the the folks out at Stanford, out at Scale, and we were talking about curriculum alignment, and they were asking us to kind of talk through what we had done on our own campus. And I shared the process with them that I'm going to share with you today. And when I had shared that out, they asked me to write the curriculum for this, and I said, that's fine. And this is one of the big pieces of kind of the upfront information that we just need to make sure we're all on the same page with. So when I look at preparation versus support, preparation is what occurs before you complete an edTPA. Preparation occurs in coursework and in field work during a program. So anytime you hear me talking about preparation, I'm referring to really any experience before student teaching. And then support is what we give our candidates while they're completing their official edTPA. And you'll understand in a little while why I use the word official there. Okay, so preparation occurs before and support occurs during the time that candidates are working on their edTPA. I found from my experiences that those are two very, very different processes. You end up working with some of the same people during those processes, but the needs that they have are very, very different. Faculty and staff have a very certain kind of need to help understand how to embed opportunities for edTPA into their coursework and their field experiences. And the people who are supporting our candidates, our cooperating teachers, those in the field, our university supervisors, they need a different kinds of resources when they're supporting. So today, we're really going to focus on the preparation piece. If we have time at the end, because this does, kind of lead up to completing an edTPA, if we have time at the end, I can share with you some of the resources that we've developed to help support candidates during that process. So I'll try to share some of them with you if we have time. Just don't let me forget, because it's not on a slide. So you might just have to say, hey, you promised. Let me know. Okay? So when I look at preparing teacher candidates to complete an edTPA, I think of these kind of three things that are listed here. It's a faculty or instructional staff responsibility, right? I've had many arguments with colleagues, discussions maybe, they've mostly been arguments, that it really is, it's a responsibility. This is ultimately, in most of our states, something that candidates need to pass for licensure. We are in the business of preparing student teachers to become educators, to become licensable. And so when I look at this, I see this as a faculty and staff responsibility, that we have to make sure that we're preparing our candidates with the knowledge and skills to be effective educators. In this case, remember today we're talking about edTPA as measured by edTPA. Might be measured by other things as well, but one of those measures is edTPA. It occurs in both coursework and fieldwork. So over the years, I've collaborated with all of our licensing departments, all of our licensure programs in the college to help all of those program coordinators, department chairs, faculty and staff understand the requirements of edTPA, to navigate what the specific knowledge, skills, and dispositions that a candidate needs to be able to show for that content area. Right? They're all just slightly specific to content. So helping faculty, staff understand all of those components. So those have been big pieces that I've had to work with them on and really help them think about how can I embed this into my course without literally just walking through a handbook the entire 14 weeks of a semester, right? I've had people say, well, I spend 6 weeks doing nothing but teaching candidates how to read the prompts. That's teaching to the test in a really, I think, overt and kind of overkill kind of way. We don't need to do that. What candidates need are just opportunities to practice the knowledge and skills that are assessed by edTPA. They need opportunities to find evidence, right? edTPA is such an evidence-based performance assessment. They have to know how to select evidence. How can they draw someone's attention in writing to, this is where you can find my evidence of building rapport with my students, or planning based on cultural, community, and personal assets. Those are the kind of things that they need help with, not reading a prompt. They should be able to read a prompt. So that's kind of what we look at. Field work, I think field work is an opportunity, a very rich opportunity, to embed experiences for candidates, to practice the knowledge and skills and practice actually instructing in a way that aligns with edTPA. It can be a challenge because we don't have our supervisors, as I'm sure is the case for most of you, are part-time, oftentimes retired faculty, retired K-12 educators, and this is a lot to ask them to do. I can show you in just a little bit one of the forms that we've created to help our supervisors think about edTPA in terms of when they're giving feedback and talking with candidates after they've seen them in the field. And I'm talking about pre-student teaching. So all the field work that they do before student teaching. We've created a set of questions that they can ask candidates and use to kind of guide their conversations with the cooperating teacher and the teacher candidate, to guide those conversations after they've been to an observation. So I'll show you that as well. That's on our website. And then the last piece in terms of preparing candidates is that faculty and staff need to have time to really sit with that handbook. And I said this earlier, it really requires a deep understanding of the handbook. I look at our understandings, my faculty and my colleagues' understanding of edTPA many years ago, 3, 4, 5 years ago, to where we are now. And so many of us have grown so richly in our understanding of the assessment. And that's because we've taken the time to really sit with it and really read through it. It has a language of its own. I kind of joke, like, there should be a session on academic language for edTPA because it has its own, right? I know, some of you are nodding because you know I'm right. Like, it has its own language. It has very specific requirements, has a very specific structure, and some of those things aren't always evident to faculty, staff, and teacher candidates. These are busy people with lots of moving parts in their lives and lots of things going on. And to sit down and really read through a 60-page manual for a test it's daunting and it's overwhelming. But really, that's what faculty and staff need to do in order to become deeply familiar with it. The other thing I would say, and this is just kind of me putting this out there, I became uniquely familiar with edTPA after I participated in locally evaluating some of them. It's not until you begin to take a look at how your students are responding to prompts and selecting evidence that you can begin to understand why they're scoring the way that they are. Whether they're scoring very high or somewhere in the middle or unfortunately very low, it's not until you do that qualitative analysis of that you really have that understanding. I would encourage all of you to participate in a local evaluation workshop so that you have the knowledge and skills about how to do that, and then to look at some of your candidate work samples. The other piece that, and this is kind of a plug, and I don't even get paid for this, but I went through the official scorer training as well, and that was where I really truly felt like I had a solid and comprehensive understanding of not just edTPA and the structure and the requirements, but now kind of that full picture in terms of how it was going to be scored. So that's kind of my other piece to that as well, is to consider that, especially if you're a program lead, if you're an edTPA coordinator, it's really a valuable experience to go through in terms of thinking through what do scores mean and how do we arrive at those and what's kind of the big picture. So something just to toss out there and to think about it. So kind of back to teacher candidates and this notion of preparing them. When I think about the continuum of a program, I see three very distinct time frames, and candidates' needs at those time frames are different. So early in a program, teacher candidates need to be introduced to edTPA constructs. So what are the big things about edTPA, and how can we begin to introduce those early in a program? If you had to tell me, what are the things that you think a candidate needs to know early in the program, what would you tell me? What is it, right? What is the beast, right? They hear about it in their dorm rooms, they hear about it in the lunchroom, they hear about it in other classes, they hear about it in the hallway, and man, are they nervous, right? They have no idea, absolutely. I also think it's an opportunity for us to kind of calm some nerves. I somewhat jokingly say, you know, it's like sex. If you learn about how to do an edTPA on the street, it's like sex. If you learn about it on the street, you're going to do it wrong. So come to a meeting, I know, come to a meeting and let me tell you what it is. Because if you learn about it from somebody else, I promise you their interpretation is not going to be exactly what you need to hear, right? So we tell ours, come to meetings, absolutely. What else? What else do you think candidates need to know early in their program? So a rationale or a purpose for why we're doing an edTPA. Absolutely. What is it designed to measure? Right? What is it designed to measure? Absolutely. What else? Absolutely. Academic language, right? So that they can start to become familiar with that term. Notice it's not that they're doing anything with it yet. They're just being introduced to the idea. Academic language is a great example because it is a complex construct. There's a lot of us in this room that would like to be at Melanie's session tomorrow on academic language, right? Because it's a tough concept to understand. I think it's tough for faculty and staff. It's even more tough for our teacher candidates. So early in the program to begin introducing the idea of academic language, absolutely. Get them writing, absolutely. Get them writing early. You know, tasks 1 and 2 are reflective writing. And we tend to do a lot of that in ed prep. We tend to do a lot of reflective writing. Or we're getting better at it maybe. Task 3 is a switch from reflective writing to analytical writing, where you are analyzing data and interpreting it and telling what it means. So that switch from reflective writing to analytical writing proves to be pretty challenging for candidates. It's not something that we don't tend to ask them to do analytical writing in their coursework or in their field work. So these are all things that we really need to be introducing candidates to. Some of the other things that I would say we need to introduce candidates to early in the program is the idea of justifying or providing a rationale for our planning decisions, our instructional decisions, and our assessment decisions by using theory and research. I'm a cognitive psychologist by training, so the theories of human learning and teaching and learning are fascinating to me, but not to most 19 and 20-year-olds. They don't seem to care as much as I do about them. But they need to understand that what teachers do, what excellent educators do, is not just, we don't do it because it looks good when an administrator comes in, or it's quick, or it's easy, or it was something I just cooked up at the last minute. We do what we do because it's a best practice that's grounded in theory and research. And they need to be introduced to those concepts of theory and research very early in their program so that they have time to develop an understanding of those before they go into the field and see them. So I think that's an important piece. I think assessment is an important piece that we need to start early in a program. Assessment on our campus, in our state, and in the nation is still the lowest task. My reasons, why that is, there's a dozen of them. I think a lot of times as faculty and staff, we don't always make our assessment practices clear to our students. We're not making that transparency or making that transparent for them. That's something that's still, our assessment of them still happens behind closed doors. We're not really necessarily always inviting them into that process to really learn about it. And then oftentimes when they're in the field before student teaching, at least on our campus, they might be in the field, but they're not in there necessarily long enough to be teaching a lesson, giving an assessment, and then using that assessment data to make the next decision. So they're not able to close the loop. They might plan a lesson and do a formative assessment. Some of them might even be there long enough to do a summative assessment, but really for the most part, they're not there then to close the loop on that. And so that piece becomes very hard for them. They have a hard time kind of thinking that whole process all the way through. So these are all things that I think our candidates need to be able to be introduced to early in our programs. Then in the middle of their program, being however long your program is, the middle is kind of when they're out in the field before student teaching. So they're having some opportunity now to practice these foundational skills and knowledge that you've shared with them. So they're out in the field, they're able to start doing a little bit of it. Even if it's just a little bit, they're out there and they're able to start doing something. And then at the end of their program is when they can demonstrate mastery, right? Through observations, evaluations from their cooperating teacher, their supervisors, any other assessments that your university or your program requires, edTPA, all of those. That's when they can demonstrate that mastery, is during student teaching. So again, I see this as three very distinct time periods where candidates need very different things at each point in time. Okay? So when we got into edTPA and kind of the rumble had died down a little bit, and we didn't spend meeting after meeting having philosophical discussions about edTPA, and we kind of were able to get down to the business of, okay, how are we going to help our candidates? We quickly realized that we needed to think about how we could embed assessments into our program. And so that's what we did. We began creating embedded signature assessments. So what is an ESA? Bless you. An ESA is a key learning opportunity or assessment that's completed as part of coursework, and it's aligned to whatever. edTPA, InTask, Tennessee standards, content standards, it doesn't matter. You can align it to whatever you want. There's so many crosswalks. A lot of the SPAs have crosswalks between their standards and edTPA. InTask standards and edTPA are aligned. Most states now have aligned their standards with InTask. So you can find the crosswalks for these all over. So they're key learning opportunities that are embedded in a course or fieldwork. They're designed to provide specific knowledge or skills at a key point in time in the program. Okay? And then this is the part that I still on my campus get this question all the time. Really? It's a common assessment across all sections of a course, scored on a common rubric. That is a true ESA. I've had faculty even this year stop me and say, are you telling me Are you telling me that I have to score, that I have to give this assessment in my section of this class? And I have to use the same rubric that everybody else is? Yes, I am. Yes, I am telling you that, yes. That is a true embedded signature assessment. And it's a hard conversation to have. I am a faculty member in my college, so I come to the table both as an administrator and a faculty member, and I very much have to come with the faculty hat and the faculty lens when I have this conversation. If I come as an administrator, it's this top-down, I'm telling you how to assess learning and evaluate learning in your course. So I have to really come at this conversation from the perspective of a faculty member, that we really need, in order to know how our candidates are performing on something, we have to compare apples to apples. And the only way to compare apples to apples is if we're all doing the same assessment and using the same rubric. It's the only way we can really compare apples to apples. It's a fight, it's a pushback. I mean, I still get pushback myself. So, but we do what we can. We continue to grow, we're continuing to learn and evolve. So we make progress, for sure. We try to make little progress, right? Any questions about what an embedded signature assessment is? The question is the pushback in the name of academic freedom? Oh, yes. Ringing loud and clear and long, yes, academic freedom. And I understand. I mean, I have, you know, I'm a professor as well. Like, I get, I'm a faculty member as well, and I absolutely understand the notion, and I value the notion of academic freedom. My caveat is that, just like nursing, just like social work, we are licensing, we are preparing people to be licensed in a particular field. And therefore, we have some shared responsibility that we have to be preparing them for that. The argument doesn't always work, I'll be honest. I mean, I still have faculty now who are like, I'm not interested. I'm not interested in playing this game. I'm not going to do it. But I will say that those are very few and far between now. And we have finally gotten to a point where we do have one common assessment across our entire education program. Every single teacher candidate completes it. I'll tell you about it in a little while. So we finally did make some headway in that. But yes, academic freedom is the one and only argument. Well, it's the one argument that's the loudest and longest. Other arguments are, you know, once you begin to all use the same assessment and the same rubric, what do you have to do after that? You have to analyze your data, right? You have to do that next step of inter-rater reliability. And we have some faculty who are, you know, that's just not something that they're interested in participating in. And they're busy people, I understand. I mean, we're all overworked and we've got candidates and we all have lots going on. So I understand. It's a tough process for sure. Any other questions about anything so far? Preparation, support, kind of my little idea of a timeline through a program, ESAs. Really? Okay. It's going to be a quiz in a few minutes then. I'm sure of that. All right, so what needs an ESA? This is another question that I get asked all the time. And people ask me like, can you tell me what all your ESAs are? Can I have a copy of all your ESAs? Well, yeah, but you're just going to throw them away. Like, they're not going to do you any good, right? Like, our ESAs are based on the needs of our students. And so this is where you begin to use your local evaluation data and any official scores that you already have. And you begin looking deeply and richly at which tasks are your students challenged by, which rubrics are hard for them. And you begin using those data to think about, okay, if that's what's challenging, where in our program are they being introduced to that? Where are they having opportunity to practice it? When I come to campuses, I was invited to a campus. I did this similar workshop in New Jersey last year, I think. or maybe earlier this year. And then this summer, one of the campuses invited me back to facilitate a curriculum alignment workshop with just their college. It's a day-long, very intensive. We are digging through syllabi and assignment descriptions and everything else. And at the end of the day, we have all 15 edTPA rubrics plastered around the wall, big, big, big pieces of paper, plastered around the wall. And we have Post-it notes from all the different programs. And you can see visually where courses can identify opportunity to practice and opportunity to be introduced to all those different constructs. It's a very interesting process to go through when you start looking at your data and thinking about your students. Okay, so that's the how do we know what needs an ESA? It's the things that your candidates are struggling with. So if you were to ask me what are common challenges, I would tell you what's right up here. Academic language, 4 and 14. Those tasks, those rubrics tend to hinge together. If you don't plan for supports, your students probably aren't going to be using academic language in the classroom. So 4 and 14, definitely a challenge. They, like I said, they hinge together. 3, 10, and 15 tend to hinge together because those are the rubrics that require them to draw on the student's personal, cultural, or community assets and theory and research. So 3, 10, and 15. So oftentimes we see people developing embedded signature assessments for that idea, the justification. And then rubrics 12 and 13, giving actionable feedback and candidate or students using actionable feedback. Again, I would argue that the reason that's a challenge in student teaching is because they're not in the field long enough before student teaching with those students to close that loop of giving the feedback on an assessment and making decisions and letting the students use the feedback to show that they've learned from that. It's just a nature of how we are. In Wisconsin, we have 1 semester, 18 weeks of student teaching. About 50% of our candidates are in 1 placement for 18 weeks. The other 50% are in 2 placements, 9 and 9. And they complete their edTPA in the first 9 weeks. So oftentimes it's the first time that they've been out in a field placement for an extended period of time where they're able to actually give that feedback and then have candidates or their students use that feedback. But those are the task 3 rubrics that I see. For those of you who have been doing this now and who have some data, either local evaluation or official data, what do you see? You see this. Pretty common. Anybody see anything different? Nothing yet. Some of you don't have anything yet, and that's all right. But the process is when you get your local evaluation data and your official data, you look and you say, are we seeing the same as the national trends, or do we see something different? When we look at these data, we do look at it for our entire program. And to give you a sense of how big our program is, we have about 120 to 150 teacher candidates each semester. So that's kind of where we are. Sometimes we've dipped as low as 70. We've been as high as like 180. But we live in like the 120, 130, 140 range usually. So when we look at our data, we do look at it as an aggregate with all of our candidates. In the main, in our program, how are candidates doing? What rubrics are they scoring high and low on? Blah, blah, blah. We look at all of that. But then we do also break it down by which handbook they used. So everybody who used this particular handbook. We also break it down by license or major. So we look at it from multiple perspectives. Did you have a question? Well, you're right by the microphone. You got to use the microphone.
Common challenges that you mentioned, are they national challenges or challenges of your university?
Excellent. They're both. They're both. These are 4 and 14 and 12 and 13 tend to be the lowest scoring rubrics across the nation. And 3, 10, and 15, I would say the only reason they are not is because, and if you're coming to my deep dive session tomorrow, we'll talk about this, but on 3, 10, and 15, the requirement to justify using research and theory is a secondary criterion. So even if they just name drop and they just say, well, I created an inquiry-based unit because, Piaget says that we learn best through whatever. That is just name dropping. They can still earn a 3 with that. So they're still scoring proficient. So the rest of our time together, I want to show you an ESA that I've created for my course. I'm going to talk to you about how we've also embedded opportunities for our candidates to really get their hands into edTPA across our entire program. So we'll take a look at a couple different things here, and we can have some conversations about what you're doing on your campus as well, or what you think you might need to do on your campus. So this is a work in progress, and to be honest, as your candidates get more used to edTPA, as they get into edTPA more, as your faculty and staff get into it more, you might find that needs wax and wane over time as candidates develop skills in their programs, and faculty enrich their own understanding as well. So this is an ESA that I developed for EdPsych. EdPsych is one of my courses that I teach at the undergraduate level. And so lots of theory, lots of research, and like I said earlier, there's not a whole lot of us who get really super excited by all of that, and certainly, initially at least, not a lot of 18, 19, 20-year-olds. They're not really thrilled about having to think about and learn about and remember about theory and research. So what I created was what I call the folder of wisdom. I guess you're wise when you finish it, I don't know, but the folder of wisdom is what I created for my students. And this is a way for students to track the knowledge and the information about particular theorists, and then also make a link to the classroom. You have this as a handout, and if you don't, if you just raise your hand, I'll walk around and give you one. Anybody else missing one? Nope? Okay, let me give this lady one. You may absolutely have extra ones. In fact, you know what I'll do? I will leave these all up here, and if you want extra ones on your way out, you just take them, because I got to get on an airplane. And this is not carry-on luggage friendly. So you take that. So this is the folder of wisdom activity, EdPsych. You can kind of skim through the directions, of what they have to do. It's pretty self-explanatory, though. I will say this, I used to do this activity with my students as an actual folder. We would take a manila folder and 5x7 note cards, and on the front of the note card, they would write basically what you see in column 1 here. So the principles or the major ideas about that theory or that construct. And then on the flip side of the note card, they would write the application to the classroom. Over the course of time, I had colleagues who were asking me if they could build on the folder of wisdom. So if you look at these right here, they're pretty generic, right? These are EdPsych. EdPsych in our program comes very early. It's right after they've been admitted to our program, the semester after they've been admitted. They have no field experience with this course at all. And almost all of them have never been in the field outside of being in a high school classroom as a student, right? That was the last time they were in K-12 school, was as a student. So they don't have any, if much, field experience. So these are pretty high level, kind of 5,000-foot theorists. They're not content specific at all. But I had colleagues of mine say, well, can we build on this? And one of them said, it would be really great if you would switch this from a folder to a Google Doc. Oh, my heart broke just a little bit because I just loved this folder. Like, it was just so organic, right? It was just this folder, and it was, oh, they were just charming people because they would color code all of their theorists with these note cards. And it was just really a very cool experience. And then I did it long enough that several of my students got through the program and were at student teaching. And when they, on our campus, our students come back for writing days 3 times. And when they would come back for their writing days, they would say, Dr. Kroeger, look. And they would pull out this like beaten up spaghetti sauce, coffee stained folder of wisdom. And they were like, I'm using this. It was amazing. It was really, really neat to see. And it was such an awesome thing that they recognized that they had a resource to help them with those components of edTPA where they do have to justify planning, instructional, and assessment decisions. So it was really nice to see. But I did, back to this, I did have colleagues say, well, can't we make this a Google Doc? Because then what we could do in our content courses and in our methods courses is have students add to it content-specific theories, research, principles, ideas. Okay, well, that was just really a smart idea. So I caved on the folder and I switched to this terribly, frankly, boring and awful looking Google Doc, but whatever, it serves the purpose. But what you can see on this is there are theorists, Piaget, Vygotsky, Erickson, right, Bronfenbrenner, but then there's also constructs like RTI and gradual release, formative and summative assessment. So constructs that are important in terms of, remember I talked about the 3 pieces of, or the 3 time frames of a program, beginning, middle, and end. This is beginning. Just an introduction to these theorists and researchers. So they provide the information, the principles, the ideas there. The application, again, no field experience at this course and really not much before this course, maybe a little tiny bit, but not much. I use the textbook Educational Psychology by Anita Woolfolk. She makes explicit, clear, and direct connections from these theorists, principles, ideas to how they look in a classroom. It's just a really well done job. I'm sure other authors do the same thing, but I just really like how Anita Woolfolk has it laid out. It's all right there. She talks about, introduces formative assessment, and then talks about what it looks like in the classroom. Introduces summative assessment, talks about what it looks like in the classroom. So for mine, I have, I facilitate this in class sometimes. There are times we pull out our folders of wisdom and we actually work on it in class as a group, because it's not really about me assessing their particular knowledge of each individual thing. Like, I don't care if they can do this by themselves or if they can do it with a group or with all of us. It's so early in the program that if they were to do this by themselves, it would just be them copying out of a book. They don't have anything to connect it to. They have no experiences to enrich it. So if we do it as a class, that's fine. We can at least engage in some dialogue. Some of them will have dialogue in class and then I'll assign it for homework. But at the end of the semester, we end up with this whole grid completely filled out. I've had some students, when we switch to the electronic version, do some very cool things. And like for Bronfenbrenner, RTI, things that do have kind of a visual framework with it, they'll actually go out and do a Google image search and then pop an image in here. So RTI, they'll put the triangle, right? So they put in some nice images. The other really nice thing with the online format is that they can put in links to external sources. So there are some great resources out of Berkeley, out of Cornell, out of other colleges of education that have really rich modules that they can look at, that they can draw upon to think about these theorists and these ideas. So they'll pull those and they'll kind of put that hyperlink into that document as well. So I guess for all my complaining, I guess it worked out better, but I'm still not happy. I want the best of both worlds is what I want. I want the folder with all the links and all the electronic niceties with it too. Not happening. That's an excellent question. The question is, where does this live? Does it live in Google Docs or does it live in our LMS? It lives in Google Docs. The candidates create the table. Actually, I assign it. I create the table. I assign it through Google Classroom, but I could just as easily have them create it in Google Docs. It doesn't matter. We use D2L as our LMS. Never goes in there. We use TK20 as our assessment management system. Doesn't go in there. This goes just in Google Docs, and that's because there's this need to carry it forward. Does that make sense? The easiest way to carry it forward is to do it in Google Docs. We can just grow it however we need to then. So yeah, on our campus, we leave it in Google Docs. Yes. Yes, they do. The question is, does each individual student have their own? And yes, they do. And like I said, I'm not scoring this on an individual, I do look at them, but really I don't evaluate them with a score. I just give feedback. So for instance, if they had, if they were talking about Vygotsky, and they didn't talk about the zone or didn't write about the zone of proximal development, my feedback to them would be, what do you know about the zone of proximal development? And then that's when they respond to that. So it is, everybody gets their own copy, and I evaluate them for the purpose of providing feedback. Because it's really, I want them to be, at the end of it, I want them to all be correct. Right? Everybody should get 100 at the end because I've given you feedback. Everybody should get, I do standards-based grading, so everybody should get a proficient when they're finished, because I want this to be the document that you carry forward with you as you walk through your program. So I don't want them to leave with something that's partially finished or has incorrect information on it. So therefore, it's really ungraded, and it's just about the feedback in my class. Yes? We use TK20. Okay, so the question is, why don't we have this living in TK20? Or whatever the system would be. So the quickest answer is that I have 2 other colleagues that teach this course with me, and this year is the year that they will adopt this as well. So I'm sure this will go through some revisions. Right now, this is an ESA in my course. But remember I said earlier, to be a real ESA, it needs to be in all sections of all courses. That's work that my colleagues and I will do this year. And so at that point, it may end up in TK20 as like a benchmark that we do for students. But it's not right now because not everybody has it. Does that make sense?
Right. And considering that TK20 and Tastering now merged with LiveText.
Correct.
And they have that robust sharing little piece that goes through there that will go through all the faculty and you run back and forth with all that business.
I think with the merger with the 3 large assessment management systems, over the next several years, as a new product develops and emerges, kind of combining the best of all worlds, hopefully, I think we might see more rich opportunities for that kind of work to be done, where multiple faculty can be assessing kind of the same artifact or the same piece of uploaded item. Absolutely. But for now, that's where we are on our campus. Yes? Can I give you the microphone real quick? Do we have that microphone? Oh, it's right here. Okay. Okay.
Our students in our EdSci class does something similar, but it's a PowerPoint where they have to put the theory and topic and explain it and then apply it to the classroom. And it's done in all sections of EdSci, and it's housed in LiveText. And we also have a scoring rubric for that.
Excellent. Does anybody have any questions about what I've shown you here? What I hope you see is that it's a pretty simple ESA. This is not complex, profound work. It's not a 10-page paper that they're writing. I'm not adding this incredible burden of time onto our students. Like I said, some of this work we do in class. We do it in small groups, we do it in pairs, we do it in a large group. And I kind of use it as an opportunity as I formatively assess in my class. I just kind of feel out the room, right? Do we need to do this as a large group? Are they getting it to where I can set them off to do this on their own? Do we need to do some smaller groups where we can process through some of this a little bit? So I very much tailor it each time we do this. It kind of all shakes out just a little bit different. It depends on the students that are in my class with me and where we are kind of the day that we're doing this. But we very much, it's not, ESAs don't have to be this large, crazy task where it's this big, huge paper and we're adding this burden to not just students who are having to research and write something, but then to faculty and staff who are having to read and evaluate this. Really, ESAs can be kind of quick and dirty. They should just be able to be done quickly, get a snapshot of what you need, and then move on. So that's kind of why I've created this one. Okay?
So do you have an example of where a student took this and used it in one of those rubrics? You know what I'm saying? Like how they worded.
So we have that, but we can't share it because it's our students' work samples. Yes. So yes, I know how some of my students have used the theory and the research that they've learned in their the prompts for 3, 5, and 15. But again, I can't share those outside because they're their work. Absolutely. Okay. All right. So before we get to this process, the other thing I want to share with you is another way that we have embedded in our program an opportunity for candidates to get some experience with edTPA. One of the things we found was that our candidates, we did surveys. I mean, I've surveyed everybody, but I've surveyed everybody, okay, about everything, truly. And what we found was that our cooperating teachers, our supervisors, and our teacher candidates all actually shared one common message. And that was, edTPA is taking away from the authentic task of student teaching. And that really disturbed me. I did not like that. I kept hearing it and hearing it and hearing it, and it really bothered me. And so I started looking into why. Tell me why. Because the edTPA, you're doing the authentic tasks of student teaching. You are planning, you are instructing, and you are assessing. So why is this, what about it is challenging? And what we found after talking to different people was that it was really all the nitty-gritty details of edTPA that were challenging. So learning how to video record something, learning how to trim it, learning how to respond to a particular prompt with evidence, learning how to have your lesson plans in one place and your blank assessments in one place and instructional materials in a place, and then how to have, oh my goodness, it just went on and on and on. How to select the right video clip, right? That's a huge piece of task 2 is selecting the right video clip. So I fought long and hard for this on my campus. This is our first, second semester, first full year. We did this last spring, where we have everybody, every teacher candidate in their clinical placement just prior to student teaching. They complete what we call the clinical edTPA. Folks, it's really just an edTPA. But we call it the clinical edTPA. And programs have a little flexibility to shorten it. It's like 2 lessons, 1 video, right? It's just a smaller condensed version. And then programs have the ability to look at their data and say, okay, we don't need our candidates to do anything with these tasks or these prompts or these rubrics because we know they're doing well on that. We have evidence from other sources. And so they sometimes take some of the commentary prompts out and say, you don't need to answer all these commentary prompts. They go through a process of local evaluation. It's really, though, not about the evaluation that we're so concerned. Our goals are twofold. The first is to give feedback to the candidates, just a couple nuggets. What is something I can tell you that you can work on when you're out in the field to help you perform better? What's just a small little nugget that I can give you? The other thing, and this is really why I wanted to do this, is the reduction in stress during student teaching has been astonishing. No longer do a lot of people, cooperating teachers, supervisors, and teacher candidates, tell us that student teaching isn't an authentic task anymore, that they're so busy doing edTPA, they're not enjoying it. They're not saying that because they've been through it once. They've done it once. Our goal is really to develop habits of mind. How do you develop the habit of thinking about your students while you're planning lessons? Not planning lessons based on a curriculum or based on Common Core state standards, but planning lessons and developing activities within them to support learning for your students, whoever the your is sitting in front of you. And that's a habit of mind that we have to get into. We find that so many, and this is on our campus, and when I talk to other campuses, I kind of get this nod, this knowing nod. On our campus, a lot of our students can write lessons. They write lesson plan after lesson plan after lesson plan. Guess what they don't write? What do you think? It has to do with lesson planning. What do you think they don't write instead of lessons? What are they not writing? They're not writing unit plans. So when it gets time to do student teaching and they now have to plan a unit and not just indiscriminate lessons, but they have to plan a series of units, a series of lessons that have some thread through them and string together, it's a real challenge for some of our students. And so we find that having them do this during that clinical experience gives them an opportunity to develop that habit of mind. Because remember, in task one, easiest way to fail task one is to have no alignment between your standards, your central focus, your learning objectives, and your assessments. If you don't have that alignment between those, you are going to fail task one. And chances are that most of the ones that I see that have very low task one have low task twos and threes as well. It's really hard to dig yourself out of it. If you have no alignment planned, you probably didn't teach with alignment and you probably didn't assess with alignment. So they tend to, once they fall on task one, we see them hover a little lower on the other tasks as well. So we try to really use the clinical edTPA as a way to build habits of mind. How do we use assessment data? Now they're in the field a little bit longer, so how can they use that data to make decisions? Even if they're out of the placement by the time they would get that assessment data back, what would they do with it? They can at least be thinking about it. What would they say? This data has told me this, and this is what I would do with those students. So that's really another ESA that we've created. And all we've really done is take the structure, the framework, the requirements of edTPA. We actually assign it through TK20. Like, we literally send out the edTPA handbook. It's the same framework. We send out the same thing, same portfolio. And then we just kind of strip some of the language out about submitting to Pearson and all that kind of stuff. They obviously don't do that. It just stays internal. We assign evaluators, and then we give them that feedback. We do all 15 rubrics. Yes, we do. Yep, we do all 15 rubrics. And we spread the love across all faculty. That's something that everybody, as a faculty member, everybody has to engage in, is locally evaluating. It's usually 2 or 3 per semester, sometimes a few more. Okay? Any questions about that? Yeah.
I'm sorry, so you do 2 or 3, each student does 2 or 3, or each faculty member grades 2 or 3?
Excellent question. Each faculty member evaluates about 3 clinical edTPAs. We're not that hateful. We don't make the candidates do 3 edTPAs. We like them way more than that. That'd be terrible. Can you imagine? One's enough for anybody. It does sound scary. Yeah. So the question is, how long is the clinical field experience where they're doing the clinical edTPA? How long is it? And I will just say this, it varies by program. Some of them are in the field for a week, back in the classroom for a week. In the field for a week, back in the classroom for a week. Others are out for 2 or 3 or 4 weeks at a time and then come back to the classroom. There's a lot of variability between all of our different programs and how they have structured that last clinical experience. So yeah, I kind of stay out of it. We just create the structure, and then that programs have to figure out how to implement that in terms of when in that field experience is it best for your candidates to do this. Yeah, I try not to get into the nitty-gritty because there's too much of it.
And this is more, you're still using the 15 rubrics, but it's like a mini edTPA.
It's a mini edTPA, yes, because it's in the real edTPA, right? It's 3 to 5 consecutive lessons, 2 video clips. It's all 5 prompts for all 3 tasks. But in the clinical edTPA that we do, it's 2 lessons, and we ask that if possible they be consecutive, although occasionally, because of cooperating teacher requirements or cooperating teacher limitations or whatever, they actually can't be consecutive lessons, so they're just, one is 1 week and one is the next week. It's just how it works. So we try to be very, very, very flexible in terms of what can you do. It's really not about the work. It's about developing habits of mind and thinking through everything that you need to do when you're thinking about planning. And then you're in the middle of instruction, and then you're assessing student learning. It's really about those habits of mind. That's really what we're trying to do. So we offer programs a great deal of flexibility. Yes? What are they turning in? What are they submitting? They are submitting the responses to the commentaries. So they're submitting commentaries, a context for learning. They're doing the exact same work. Yep. But we do have some programs, like I said, there's 5 prompts for each of the 3 tasks in the commentaries, 5 prompts for each of the 3 tasks. Some of our programs said, you know what, we know our students know how to do this. We have other evidence of it. We're going to take this responsibility, this requirement out. And so they might have their candidates answer 1, 2, 4, and 5, leaving prompt 3 out or something. So it's just a way, I mean, the programs, again, can tailor it to how what knowledge and skills and practice their candidates need. I will say most of them just have them do all of it. Most of them have them do all the prompts. And then so we've asked candidates now for the past 2 semesters, we've gone back out during student teaching and asked our candidates, okay, what did you think about the clinical edTPA? And overwhelmingly, the response is, yeah, that was a giant pain in the butt when you made me do it, but thank you. Because when I got to student teaching, I was not scared of edTPA. I knew what was going to be expected. I knew how I was going to do it. I had practiced doing everything. I got feedback, and I was ready to go. Because remember, and I said earlier, when they do their official edTPA, we give support, right? But we can't give feedback during official edTPA. There's nothing I can give feedback on. But if they do their clinical edTPA and they're missing something, or they're just not quite being clear enough, that's an opportunity for me to give very rich feedback and very directed and corrective feedback if they're kind of totally missing the boat. I can give them corrective feedback during that time. So that's another opportunity that we use to give that level of feedback. Yeah. Here. I keep forgetting to use this.
We are one of the schools that is doing the CAPE accreditation.
Okay.
And one of the jobs that we have to do is to, and we do what you're talking about with the pre student teaching experience with some edTPA. But now we're being asked to align that in addition to the team rubric, which is a Tennessee teacher evaluation model, to edTPA and to CAPE. So have you done any alignment with edTPA and something like CAPE?
So the question is, have we done anything with alignment between edTPA and CAPE? Our program is not CAPE accredited. We are accredited through our State Department of Public Instruction. So we don't have that. I know that there has been a great deal of work and alignment between CAPE and edTPA, and that alignment comes because of the alignment to InTask, right? It's actually kind of alignment to edTPA proxy because it's really alignment to InTask, and InTask is aligned to edTPA. So it's kind of that alignment by proxy that has happened. But it's definitely tough. We have, in our state, we've also tried to align edTPA to educator effectiveness, the effectiveness models that in-service teachers have to go through the work that they submit in order to provide evidence of their effectiveness as an educator. So we've had to do that work as well at our state level. Yeah.
How'd it go?
Well, it actually didn't go too bad. I mean, yeah, it didn't go too bad because it's the challenge is getting the right people at the table, right? Because K-12 educators are the ones who know best about the effectiveness, and IHEs know about the edTPA. And so you have to have, you kind of have to have the right people at the table, and that's been our biggest challenge, is getting the right people at the right table at the right time to have those conversations. But I think I was telling some people during break, our state had done some conferences similar to this. We, again, because we're an early adopter, we didn't have a whole lot of people externally coming in to help us. We sort of had to build it ground up. And so one of the workshops that I did, I partnered with one of the agencies in our state. So our state can use either Danielson, Strong, or a homegrown model, and a state-approved homegrown educator effectiveness model. Most of ours use Danielson, but then one of our state agencies developed a educator effectiveness model based on Strong. And so that is called educator effectiveness. And there's about a third of our districts in our state that use that model. So I actually partnered with the lead of the educator effectiveness working group of that team. And together we did the crosswalk ourselves. And then I presented on that at a conference in our state. So it can be done. It's just you have to have the right voices with the right knowledge and the right expertise sitting at the table. And that's what's tough. Yeah.
I have a question about like with the PDP process, does Wisconsin still use that? And if there's any carryover from with the edTPA into the PDP process?
We still, okay, so the question is, does Wisconsin use the PDP, the Professional Development Plan? Do you guys use that in Tennessee? No? How do you know about it?
I'm from Wisconsin.
So, yes, we use PDP, but not now. Because with our new budget, our state budget, that process actually came out, and our state is going back to issuing a lifetime license. I can't get started. So the PDP, it's going away. There'll be no need for it.
Carryover with edTPA in terms of evaluation by the principals then, you know what I mean? Or,
Nope.
no?
None.
So it's just
Totally separate. Yep, totally separate. Next question. Yep. Here, can I give you this? because that way I don't have to repeat everything you're saying.
I'm sorry, and I'm sorry to have so many questions, but the group that is doing the clinical edTPA, and they're doing it right before student teaching,
Yep.
may be in a placement that carries on over into student teaching. What type of ethics, or what type of, I shouldn't say ethics, what type of feedback could you give to that group?
Okay.
Because you still have the same group of kids.
So in our state, the way that it works is our students never have the same placement from preclinical or pre-student teaching to student teaching. So a clinical placement is always different than your student teaching placement. Almost always even a different school, definitely a different grade, because what our program tries to do is if you're a 1-8, during preclinical you might do early elementary school, and then during student teaching you might do middle school, like 5, 6, 7, 8. So they're definitely different classrooms. Now, I'll play devil's advocate, okay? And I'll say this. If I had a student teacher who was in this teacher's classroom, preclinical, they're in there for the first semester as a clinical student. And then in the spring semester, they're still in the same classroom, but now they're in there as student teaching. During that preclinical experience, they're still not completing their regular edTPA, their official edTPA. That feedback is full on, no holds barred, like game on, you give whatever kind of feedback you want, even if they're with the same students, because they're going to be teaching different lessons by the time spring comes along. They're going to be teaching something. When they get into teaching those spring lessons, the lessons for their edTPA, that's when we don't give any feedback, right? We don't give any feedback during that time. But up until that point, if I had a teacher candidate who was going to be with the same teacher that whole first semester when it was just clinical, heck yeah, I'd be using every opportunity to give them feedback. Absolutely. You're welcome. Yes. Oh, here, hold on. Here you go.
At the University of Memphis, we have a year-long residency program, so they are in the same classroom both semesters, and the first one is treated as a clinical experience.
Excellent.
And then the second one is their real edTPA.
Fantastic. And during that time, you give them, during the clinical part, you give them rich feedback about everything, and then during the student teaching portion, you don't. Yeah, that's, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that process, because during that clinical semester, they are there to still be learning. They're still refining their skills. They're still putting it all together, right there. That's what I call practice. They haven't even synthesized it all yet. We're hoping that they synthesize and can put it all together in student teaching. But during that clinical experience, they're in and out of the classroom, so they're still just seeing parts of a day or parts of a week or parts of a month. They're not necessarily there 8 to 3 Monday through Friday for weeks on end. They're coming back to the university to still be learning and be communicating and be talking. Absolutely. The other thing I want to show you, and I'm going to ask you to bear with me as I pop out of this PowerPoint for just a minute, and I will go to our university's webpage. You can find these if you go to uwosh.edu. So uwosh.edu. And I'm going to type in here, Office of Field Experience. And we want the College of Education one. So right here, it should be the first thing that pops up. Well, they changed it, but it's over here. If we go to Forms, so right over here, remember I told you earlier that we created some supports for our supervisors to use to give feedback to our candidates when they were in the field. Because remember, we want to be preparing candidates in coursework that is faculty and staff, but also in the field. And our cooperating teachers have so much going on. They're burdened by their own jobs, their own requirements, everything that they're doing. It's really hard for us to ask our cooperating teachers to really make direct connections to edTPA. At least at the clinical level, there's a little bit more opportunity when they're there all the time for student teaching. But at the clinical level, it's pretty challenging. But if you look down here under cooperating teacher and university supervisor forms, there's an observation form. So if you click this, this is the observation form that our university uses, or our program uses, for our clinical placements and our student teaching placements whenever a supervisor goes out into the field to observe. It's aligned to in-task, and it's clustered with the 4 in-task, clustered by the 4 in-task clusters. But what I want to draw your attention to is this part right here. Okay, and I'm going to unhighlight it so you can read it a little bit better, and let me even just make it bigger. Okay. What we created, myself and a colleague, one of my dear friends and a supervisor who I absolutely trust. She had been to so many edTPA workshops. She was very familiar with the handbook. Penny was just very much on top of things. She'd been supervising for many, many years. So she really understood the process of supervision, the process of communicating with candidates about what they're doing and what they're struggling with and what they're doing well. So what she and I created was this area called points of discussion. And they're not questions that have to be answered or have to be addressed, but they're there as opportunities to engage in a conversation, and they're all directly linked to edTPA. So this was an opportunity for us to have some guidance for our supervisors who might not have as rich of an understanding or as deep an understanding of edTPA, but yet they can still help provide feedback to candidates while they're in the field, which is such a critical component, right? It's, as a faculty member, I'm not in the field with my candidates at all. I'm not a supervisor. I'm never in the field. So we needed a way to have our supervisors be providing that level of feedback as well. So this is what we created. So this is for the learner in learning. And then if we scroll down to the content knowledge, which is standards 4 and 5, whoops, there they are right there. Instructional practice 6, 7, and 8. You can see all of these. And again, they all connect to both in-task and they're directly related to the knowledge skills of edTPA, okay? And then professional responsibility, and there they are right there, okay? So I wanted to make sure I shared that with you. Yes?
Can you, I somehow missed how you got to this exact page, and I can't seem to.
Yeah, how I got to this exact page? Sure. Okay, so I'm going to go back so you can kind of see the breadcrumbs. So home, teacher education. I did a search up here for Office of Field Experience, clicked on the first link, and then once you get to this page, it's under forms. And then you scroll down, and it's right there. That observation form up at the top. If you can't find it and you want some help, I can help you navigate after we end today. I can help you navigate for sure. Okay?
Yes. How's the observation form different from the evaluation form?
Oh, well, I can show you. So the observation form, let me go back and just point a couple of things out. I'm sorry. Observation form, not observed, emerging proficient, advanced. So standards based for sure. Okay. We ask that they rate them on each standard. If they, and then they have comments that they can provide for that. And then at the bottom, well, it's not showing up on here. There's actually a section, this lives now in TK20 for us. This is just read only, but it lives in TK20, and in TK20 there's an overall comments box as well. So that's the observation form. In our programs, an observation form is completed by the supervisor every time they go out into the field to observe that candidate. Then at the end of the placement, however long it is, the supervisor, the cooperating teacher, and the candidate all fill out an evaluation form. So this candidate is self-evaluating, and then the cooperating teacher and supervisor are evaluating as well. And this, you can see, is on a 1 to 5 scale. We did have a very different scale many years ago, and we revised it to align more closely with edTPA. What we really wanted to do, we used to find that most of our candidates were scoring on a 5-point scale. They were scoring 4s and 5s. And it was very, very hard for them to understand why when it came time for edTPA, they were scoring 3s. And so we had to really adjust our language so that it was clear that you aim and live at a 3, and you visit 4s and 5s, right? You live at a 3 and you visit 4s and 5s. I mean, I'm really honest with my students, and I'm like, listen, I think I'm a good educator. I have evidence that I'm a good educator, but Lord have mercy, for me to score a 5 on everything, like, I'd have to bring my A game. Like, I would have to do some serious planning and thinking, because some days we just don't have it, right? Especially if it's a content or a lesson that we're like, ugh, really don't want to teach this particular lesson, right? Or the kids are just, right? They're just a little off that day, and you're like, oh, good gravy, right? So I'm really honest with my candidates. I'm like, look, for me to be a 5, and I've been teaching for 20 years, right? Couple decades. For me to be a 5, that would be, I'd have to think through it. Now, I might be able to do that quicker than they can, but that's what we remind them of, is that we're not expecting you to be a highly accomplished beginning educator. We're expecting you to be proficient, acknowledging that you still have time and room to grow, and that those first years of teaching, as we all remember, were times of profound professional growth, right? I look back at the teacher I was when I first started, and, well, they graduated despite me, I suppose, but not because of me perhaps every day, right? And that's what happens, is that we grow in our profession. So we've revised this evaluation form to be more reflective of edTPA kind of rating as well. And then this one also, though, the rest of it is really the same. It has the standards. You get rated for each standard. We do ask or require that if they score a 1 or a 5, that the supervisor, the cooperating teacher, or if the candidate is rating themselves as a 1 or a 5, that they provide a reason why. So if they're very, very low or very, very high, we ask for a reason why. Mostly just so that people are thinking through that more carefully. We used to have everybody was a 5. They all weren't 5s. I mean, I love them, but they weren't 5s. But they were getting 5s. And so this, having to provide that rationale, has helped kind of force people into thinking about, why am I saying, what evidence do I have that this person truly is that accomplished? That this is like an in-service teacher. So that was why we kind of did that. You'll see we have the points of discussion on here too. We used to not have them on here because this isn't really discussed. This is done after the placement ends. It's not really an opportunity for discussion. But we had supervisors and cooperating teachers who were saying, hey, can you put that back in this one too? Because I want to be able to go and see what maybe I could like think about and what my comments might be. Like I might have comments that are about in task or about something I saw in the classroom. But if I knew that you were looking for these 3 things, I could at least make notes about that. And that's very helpful. And I'll tell you when these have come in the most handy. I mean, truth be told, when they've come in the most handy is when we've had candidates fail their edTPA and need to do a retake. And we can look back at the trajectory of their field experiences, and we can see, Yep, you've been struggling here. Now, the next thing to do is put in a system, right, to monitor that as red flags and be able to provide supports for those students that we know are challenged. We don't have enough years of data to make that a robust enough data set for all of our licensure lines to have done that yet. But it definitely is on my vision board. I'm actually faculty and the assessment coordinator for our college. So I have kind of a vision board of things I want to do in the next 5 years, right? And that's definitely on my vision board to kind of dig into, okay, what are we seeing on these that if we see them, we can have it be a red flag to have some kind of action plan in place for that candidate to at least be monitoring or be ready to provide support, if and when necessary. Any questions about any of this? Nothing really? The smart food got to you too? People, what were you doing? Eating cookies? You were supposed to be eating the popcorn. All right, well, let's go back to this. So the curriculum inquiry process is really just this, right? It's the idea that we design some program, some course, some assignment, whatever, however big or whatever scale we're going to look at this on. We align it with something, Tennessee standards, InTASC, I don't care, it doesn't matter, whatever you're going to align it with, some SPA standards. We share it with all of our colleagues, share it with our students, collect our data. We review it, analyze it. I liked how the speaker at lunch today said, folks, this is chapters 4 and 5 of your dissertation. I kind of chuckled because it really is. Most of my work is still like revisiting, right, the process of chapters 4 and 5, collecting data, analyzing data, interpreting data. So we do that, and then we reflect on it, and then we go back and redesign, right? That's the point, is to go back then and say, okay, what did our data tell us? What do we need to do different? What do we need to do better? Or what do we need to just say, okay, we're monitoring this, right? One of the things that, not only with CAPE, but with our state process, one of the things that I think a lot of people get confused about or misunderstand is that whenever we're using data, we don't have to make changes. Somebody said to me, oh, do we have to have a new change every year? And I'm like, oh my God, please don't do that. Please don't do that, right? No, you make changes based on what your data are telling you. So if your data are telling you that your students are doing very well on something, then what you write in your report is students are doing blah, 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 but you write all your data, you write all your information, we'll monitor. And then we stop talking, right? We don't need to go into anything else because that's what we're going to do is monitor. We're going to keep collecting those data and we will respond when we find that we need to, because maybe our students aren't performing as well anymore. Maybe there's a new challenge that has come up. But so when we think about this cycle, this is really the curriculum mapping cycle. What we usually do during this time, and this works, like I said, if we have small programs, more people from the same program, this works a lot better. But what I want you to do is to think through this, and we're going to take maybe 2 or 3 minutes. And I want you to think through this about what are some opportunities that you know your students need, that they're not in your program right now, and you know that they need. Think about that, and then let's actually do 1 minute, and then we'll share out real quick. Where do you know? Thinking about your program, your students, whether or not you have edTPA data or not, it doesn't matter. You know your students. Where do you know that your students need to have some opportunities to develop? Who wants to share? Yes. The idea of developing a unit and not individual plans. We're in the same boat. You're not alone, right? It's just a function of how teacher ed has been set up for
Right, there's been the old template for here's the department lesson plan, but there's
Yes.
not here's a unit plan.
That's right. We even provide, and this is much to my chagrin, we provide lesson plan templates for our candidates to use for edTPA, actually all through our program. And I get it. It's a burden, an unnecessary cognitive burden on students to think about how to structure a lesson plan and how to format that document. But at the same time, I think it also pigeonholes them. They think this is the only way it can be done, and not there's as many ways to write lesson plans as there are licensed teachers. And they really begin to think of it in terms of lesson, 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 and not unit, not a big idea. Like, this is the big idea that we're going to be talking about in this unit, the essential question that we're going to seek to answer. They don't think about that. It's very tough. What else? Do you know that your candidates need some assessments, some embedded signature assessments for?
Mine don't have any idea about students and their needs. Like, they take, in Ed Psych, they learn about different kinds of, like special ed categories, but as far as, because they're never in a classroom more than 4 days.
Yep.
At a 4-day student.
And so thinking about how to plan lessons based on kids they don't have an opportunity to know any kids, right? They have no opportunity. Absolutely. What I've done for that, I've actually created vignettes where I'll create like a fake classroom profile, and then they have to plan lessons based off that vignette and that classroom profile. Pulling in, what do you know that what I told you about these students, about the community that the school is in. So I kind of create a fake situation. Absolutely. Let's do one more. What else?
Just struggling with the academic language. It's hard for us to transition as instructors.
Yep.
So to help them also make that transition, it just seems like, oh my gosh, I understand why you don't understand. Because I don't understand.
So academic language, right? It's easy to see, and you said it very well, it's easy to see why our students don't understand because we don't always understand academic language. It is a really challenging concept. I'll be honest, I now facilitate workshops on academic language, so I feel a little bit better about it. But it's taken me a number of years to grow in that confidence and to grow in that understanding. I really had to sit with it. I attended workshop after workshop after workshop on academic language, took notes, I talked to people. I mean, I really worked hard to gain and grow my own knowledge of academic language because I had faculty and staff who were like, Lori, I can't do anything about it because I don't know what to do. Tell me what to do and I'll do it. I'm like, I am not I'm not a math content person. I can't tell you how to teach academic language in your discipline, but I can teach you what it is. And I know you know what to do. You just don't know the right words to be using, right? So yeah, academic language is one I think we all still are challenged by. I find it to be so important though. To me, academic language is an issue of equity, that if we aren't making our language of our lessons transparent and accessible to every single child in that classroom, we are creating inequitability from the get-go if they can't even approach and understand the language. So I think it's a critical and crucial piece. I just think that as educators ourselves, we're maybe not quite there ourselves, and therefore we can't get our kids there if we're not there. Absolutely.